This is Mile High.
We have to do it better in order to move people along.
Up, down, inside out.
If you get your mind right,
it is not. It is a receiver of thought.
because love is my first technique.
It's now time for the show.
Welcome to the Mile High Podcast. This is your host, Dr. Daniel Knowles, coming to you from an altitude of 5,280 feet. And we are excited to have you as a listener, and we always encourage, if you're listening to this on iTunes or Stitcher or Google or YouTube or wherever you're listening to this, to hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode. We put out quality episodes, and also make sure you mark your calendar for Mile High, August 16th to 19th. Make sure you have that dialed in to join us there. I am thrilled to get some time with our distinguished guest today, and for you to have the time to get to learn more about him and from him. Dr. Rob Sinnott has been a sought-after speaker, a prolific publisher and researcher in chiropractic, 1989 graduate of Palmer, hopefully I got that right, textbook author, fellowship of fellows of the Fellow of Philosophy of Chiropractic, member of the ICA, diplomat of the Philosophical Chiropractic Standards, has done so much for chiropractic. His adaptability text and philosophy text are vital learning tools in chiropractic. And I've got to tell you, the Adaptability Symposium is a must for you to put on your calendar. Welcome to the Mile High Podcast, Dr. Rob Sinnott.
Oh, glad to be here.
We're grateful to have you here. I'm grateful to talk chiropractic with you. And I know all our listeners are going to be grateful to hear from you. And first of all, sadly, there's very few places these days where I feel people can really dive into and grow as a chiropractor, philosophically or scientifically or artistically. And I wish that wasn't the case, but those places have dwindled from 50 years ago for sure, and even 30 years ago. And I would like to think Mile High is one of them, and I know the Adaptability Symposium is a major one of them. And I want people, first off, to make sure they have that on their calendar, September 28th to 29th, and are aware of that. Before we go further into interview questions, is there anything you'd like to say about the Adaptability Symposium starting off?
Well, you know, it grew out of it became a class in the Diplomate in 2014. We normally did a research weekend, and I just have been looking at this subject for so long, I thought, you know, I talked to Dr. Lorfeld, who was running the program, and I said, you know, what do you think of doing something bigger and letting people come to this one class? And he was all over it, and so it took about 18 months to put together, but the first one was quite successful. Our keynote was Bruce H. Friedman from, he runs the Mind Body Lab at Virginia Tech. He's a very esteemed researcher. Most of these people know nothing about chiropractic whatsoever. And you know, it's always uncomfortable for me to make these calls, to contact these people, because they don't know a thing about you. What you just read about me, they could care less. Quite frankly, I think everyone should care less, because you know, what you do today is what matters. But you know, when I talked to Dr. Friedman, I read everything this man had ever written, which was a job and a half. You know, he's got thousands of citations, and you know, he's a busy man. But one thing he wrote in one of his papers caught my eye. He wrote a paper in 2007 where he referred to the tissue cells as loosely yoked biooscillators. And while that sounds pretty mechanistic, he used the word yoke. And, you know, I used to live in a farm town. Now it's an upwardly mobile, you know, a lot of Mercedes four-wheel drives that don't see a lot of dirt, if you know what I mean. But that's all good. You know, I grew up in a town that was a little more farmish. And I thought, a yoke, well, what drives the yoke? And we talked a little bit, and he was a little standoffish on the phone. And I thought, I need to pull something off here. And I said, you know, I have to ask you a question. When you mentioned loosely yoked biooscillators, what drives the yoke in this, you know, in this paper? And he just paused. There was dead silence on the phone. He said, well, I don't know. And I said, well, you must be thinking something, because you used the term. You know, whether it was subconscious or not, you know that there's something behind that's driving this whole system. And then we opened up a nice conversation. We talked a little bit about chiropractic and what we think as chiropractors and what our views of health and the loss of health or disease, as they like to call it, what that's all about. And he became a friend. And I've been able to do similar things with a lot of other researchers around the world. And it wasn't my goal to get involved in research. I practice like you do, and like everyone watching this does. But I was single until I was 41 for reasons that will become obvious as we probably move along here. But I had a lot of free time, and boy, I was always working on the profession. I was very involved in it, as an alumni. For where I went to school, I was involved with, just everything I could be involved with in the profession. And doing that very early in my career, I started to meet a lot of chiropractors at meetings that I remember one meeting I walked into at Palmer some years ago, and I was the youngest person there by over 40 years. And I'm looking around this table, and these are legends of our profession, and I thought, I don't know why they asked me to come to this young kid, Now they're all gone, except for one. I have a friend who practices in New Buffalo, and this month he starts his 70th year in practice. He's not cool.
Wow.
So, my line in the office when people ask me how much longer I'm going to practice, because I'm going into my 30th year, I always tell them 40 more years. And the answer never changes because I've promised Dr. Turrell that in New Buffalo, I'm going to pass him up. So I have to do
Well, awesome. Excellent. And again, I want people to make sure they look at we'll put the link for it in our blog post that goes along with this. But mark your calendar now for the September 28th weekend of the Adaptability Symposium. And where is that located?
It's in Chicago. It's a hotel almost connected to the airport, right across the street, free shuttle, all that stuff, But
awesome.
The reason this thing continued is the interest in 2014. But knowing it takes about 18 months to put together, that's why it's been. I never thought we'd do another one, and then, I broke down and did one in 16, and I thought, that's it, I can't do this again. And this year, and so I had some people put some pressure on me to get it done. So I think that they'll be impressed. This year, our keynote is the most prolific researcher at Ohio State University. I think he's the biggest researcher that's ever addressed our profession in our history. He's just a brilliant guy, and we've become friends. And that was a difficult one because his son, he said to me one day when we first met, I was out at Ohio State doing some coursework with him on heart rate variability, and he came up to me and he said, "So you're a chiropractor?" Now you know what that means. We've all heard this. It's like, so you think you're the tooth fairy? That's what they're. And we talked a minute, and he said, "Oh, my son was a chiropractor," and that word was. Mm-hmm. Oh my God! The blood ran out of my head. I thought, oh my God! Don't tell me this kid failed in practice. And what it was is he went to a school. I'm not going to pick on a school because I think great chiropractors could come out of any school. Mm-hmm. So the next leader of our profession can be sitting in a school that none of us watching this would send them to.
Right.
So we have to be supportive of our school. So I'm not going to get into that. But he went to a school that doesn't focus on the things that people watching this would think are important. Let's just put it that way.
Right.
And so we had a conversation, and it took me the rest of the day, intermittently speaking with him, to give him some understanding of what chiropractic is, because his view was obviously negative and slanted. But now we're friends, and he's in his 70s now, and he's just a brilliant guy, and he's thousands and thousands of citations. This man just pumps research. He actually retired because they wanted him to teach first-year medical students, and the first-year medical students were upset because he expected them to learn the names of the drugs they prescribed. Not kidding, So I'm done. I'm retired. I'm just going to do research. So he goes in every day.
Uh-huh.
He's retired, and he goes in every day and does research. So he just never stops. He's a brilliant man. So we have a real opportunity because these people have the tools and have done the work to show what we need to do in our profession, because what we do as chiropractors is we focus on the body's ability to adapt. I put something up on the Adaptability Symposium Facebook page the other day, and I put it in a quote, but I didn't say who did it because it was me, and I don't want to put my own name after a quote, but I thought about this, and I said how adaptability is a leading indicator of future health. And I meant that in economic terms in a sense, because when we talk about in economics about leading indicators and lagging indicators, leading indicators are like, as an example, people talk about rats fleeing the ship.
Right. That's
a leading indicator. When you see the rats leave the ship, you might want to get off.
Right,
you know what I mean?
Right, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Be the same thought. You see something happening, that's a leading indicator that something in your area of interest economically might be ready to tank, or go up or whatever it might be. Right. So it's a leading indicator. So a lagging indicator means it happens because of the change, not in front of the change. So when we think of that in terms of health, as chiropractors, we're interested in leading indicators. We're interested in the fact that your adaptability drops. Now this is measured. These aren't chiropractors doing this research, but they've shown that your level of adaptability drops, and then you get sick, and your adaptability raises again, and then you start to feel better. You don't start to feel better because it's going up. You feel better after it's gone back up. So it's a leading indicator of health. Symptoms are a lagging indicator. You get a fever because you've been sick. You didn't get a fever that was the indicator that you're getting sick. You're already, you know what I mean?
Yes, totally.
Yeah. Medical perspective. So, to me, we can get so far ahead of the game. They're using this kind of technology now in neonatal intensive care units to monitor low birth weight babies and monitor premature babies. They use heart rate variability in a lot of these bigger hospitals, and they can determine 2 days before one of these children is going to go septic, before they have a first symptom, they see that leading indicator of a decreased adaptability in that child, and from a medical perspective, they intervene because they know that child is going to head towards sepsis, and a lot of them die. So now they're able to save a lot of these kids. That's not really our way of looking at it, but they can't really do a lot until the symptoms show up. So they're sitting back waiting for the lagging indicator, and our profession is sitting at the cusp of the leading indicator, and that's what we need to start focusing on. That's the whole purpose of that weekend. That we do every other year, and we may do again. I don't know.
Well, excellent. And the name of that keynote speaker was what?
Give me a second. I'm so horrible with names. Give me 1 sec. Gary Bernstein.
Yes. I was just looking at the website. That's right, Gary Bernstein. Now, we talked about adaptability a bunch, right? We mentioned the Adaptability Symposium. We mentioned it. Why is this the essence of chiropractic, adaptability? Well,
when we talk about the subluxation, we talk about 4 things. They talk about MOPI. We've heard this, I never heard this till maybe 15 years ago, so I don't know where it popped up, but I mean, it's a little acronym, and that's okay. Right. But when you have that vertebra that isn't where it is shifted from its natural normal position, let's just say, where it can't function the way it's supposed to. When you change the position of a vertebra, the foramen around that vertebra deductively have to change. You can't move the vertebra and not change the openings around the vertebra. That just doesn't happen. So the first 2 are kind of linked together. But just a simple taking a film, doing a line drawing, whatever it might be, that people determine that vertebra is not in the position that it, I don't want to say should be, but it's might be subluxated. Let's leave it that way. When we talk about the idea of having nerve interference and the mental impulse flow, there's a lot of things that can show that there's a nerve interference. That's not a difficult thing. Uematsu back in the 80s at Johns Hopkins, they determined it should be 0.24 degrees from anywhere in a dermatome to the opposite dermatome. That could be your thumbs. It can be anything. But they've done studies in South Korea since then and shown that the closer to the origin of that dermatome it is, that the more accurate they are, because it's kind of like we don't roll out of Detroit with a wiring diagram. We've had some people tell us some very strange circuitous routes that they feel something going on in their body, and obviously if it's a sensation, there's got to be a nerve doing that, I suppose. But you can't open the Chilton manual for a 1968 and go, well, there's your problem. It doesn't work like that.
Right.
See, that's where medicine's at. They want everybody 5'8", 120 over 80, and it's ridiculous. And that's one of the problems, is that we still teach to a model that's archaic, and it's bordering on quasi-science anymore. And it's more to do with the terminology that we use when we teach it. Instead of saying these are averages, it's considered normal. If you ask anyone coming in your office what's the normal body temperature, they'll say 98.6. And I said, well, what if you're out doing a 5-mile run? I mean, what is your temperature going to be? Well, I don't know. I'm like, what is it in the morning compared to at night? Well, I don't know. I mean, are you only normal at one point in the day when your temperature passes 98.6? I mean, it's absurd to be locked into this model, but it's kind of where we are as a profession. So the mental impulse, that fourth component, that's the important one, because the purpose of a mental impulse from our philosophical perspective is that message to the tissue cell for that moment in time, to adapt it to its internal and external environment. And the function of a tissue cell, if you read Stevenson's, the function of a tissue cell is to do its job for the whole. It's a community, so that cell is trying to do the best job it can to contribute to the overall health of the body. Mm-hmm. Putting that together, when you see something that shows you there's a lack of adaptability, and I'm not going to sit here and tell everybody they need to go get heart rate variability. I don't believe they need to get heart rate variability. I think there's a lot of things that people do in their offices already that may be good indicators, but we don't have the science yet. I think it would be interesting to compare leg checks to HRV, to pupillary light reflex, to a lot of things that are scientifically on board. I think it would be interesting to see these things, but everybody wants to say, well, I want to test my technique against heart rate variability. Well, we can, and there's nothing wrong with that, or my personal views. We all have them, and that's a natural thing for us all to want to do. But the danger is that any of the science that isn't done exactly the way it's supposed to be done will damage us more than it helps us. Right. So, I did a heart rate variability, and I posted it a month or two ago. It was 150 heartbeats in a row, and there was one aberrant beat. There was one beat that was mismarked, and I went in, and I have software that I can go in and I can change that beat and not remark it and put the dot where it needs to be to measure that variability of the beat. Mm-hmm. And I corrected it, and it decreased the heart rate variability by 60 times by fixing one beat. I've never seen a chiropractic study where they talk about how they go in and correct beats, because nobody's doing it. So this is a danger for us not to do all the steps and everything we need to do. Whether or not you saw the one that was done in Barcelona, they had a professional athlete. Now, if you ask a professional athlete, are you healthy? They'd say, of course I'm healthy. I'm a professional athlete. You're a clown, Right. Well, they did a pre and a post adjustment on this guy with no symptoms whatsoever, and his, they consider it from a scientific perspective, the parasympathetic impulse supply and the sympathetic impulse supply, but it's kind of awkward that way. But that shift towards the parasympathetic parameters that they measure increased by over 230% post adjustment. Wow. Yeah, that's crazy good. Now, if you showed that to that athlete and said, "Thought you were healthy," do you know what I mean? How hard is it for people to understand that they need to be seen even when things are going well? If you're an athlete and you think you're in great shape and you see something like this, you start thinking, wow, I may need to get involved in chiropractic to be better at what I do. Right. And what we do in our profession instead is, we get, Jerry Rice or whoever, and I'm not knocking that, that's all great, whoever, to say great things about us, but they don't know anything about us. But I think if you went to the average NFL team and laid out what happens with professional athletes under care from a scientific perspective, not from a symptom perspective, I think that would have a more lasting effect on the players in their sense of what we do. One of the problems we have in research, we can't do what they call an AB, where you give someone an aspirin and then you don't give it to them for a while and you give it to them again. You know what I mean? So what they want to see is they want to see what they think is a positive change. Right. And then when you take it away, it goes down. And then when you give it to them, it goes up. The problem with chiropractic, it's like education. if we have several methods to teach me to read, and I don't know how to read as a child, we use one method, and now they've used that method, they've measured how it worked. Now, how do you go back and test another method on me? Because I can read now. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I think the same thing is with our profession. When you adjust someone, you've made a significant change to the function of their nerve system, and it doesn't go away right back to that level again necessarily if they don't get adjusted for a period of time before they get adjusted again. So we can't get back to A. That's
right.
our problem. So one of the researchers we're bringing in from Florida, Dr. Farron, he's a mathlete. He's one of these genius math people that uses a bunch of Greek letters and strange formulas. But he's involved in almost every important study that's out there where they look at how, I don't want to say alternative medicine, but you know that view they have of us as something, complementary medicine, whatever they call it.
Right.
He's one of the people, every time an expert paper is written saying, these professions don't do well under this model because how do we can't do the RCTs. They're not as functional for us as they are for other professions. But our profession's trying to impress medicine instead of trying to find actual answers. Because if we were more obsessed with answers, we'd get away from the RCTs. Not completely, because I think they have value. But I think one of the reasons we don't do we have an obsession with randomized control trials is because let's say there's a guy, pick anywhere, a guy in Colorado named Danny that says, I would like to do some research in my office on pick anything, duodenal ulcers, it doesn't matter, in chiropractic care, whatever you want to do, symptomless people, it doesn't matter. So they're only going to accept an RCT. And what you need to do is get this pool of people, these 100 people, let's say, and half of them get assigned to a group that doesn't get checked. Still have to come in and have you take a look at them every so often. How's that going to work in your office?
Right,
No
exactly. Right.
So field people say, well, I can't do RCT, so I have to let the researchers do the research, and I just won't pay attention to what's going on, and I'll just let them tell me what to do. And they've led us down this path towards medical views because we're only obsessed with the medical research approach, and it's something we have to change. And that's why I think Dr. Farron is going to give us some thoughts on what we might be able to do to make a little bit of a difference in our profession. I don't want to do research. I don't want to be involved in it. I don't want to have anything to do with it. But the problem I see is I think we have philosophy. I mean, the information is there. We don't have the information in science yet. And when you look at what these people are doing and what can be ascribed to this, I mean, they're assigning things like all-cause mortality, everything you will die from, the length of life, the idea that you may have cardiovascular disease, Alzheimer's, the laundry list is ridiculous of what this means when your adaptability drops. So many things can happen because it's a leading indicator of health. So if your health decreases, now you're susceptible. And it gets to that idea of stress resilience or stress susceptibility that are words I wish everybody would start using in their practice. I know Dr. Coach has been doing some videos talking about, stress resilience and stress vulnerability. And if we can start talking about that in those terms to people, because you're either resilient and you're, from what we look at from a chiropractic perspective,
right,
more resilient, or you're susceptible. And if we're heading towards susceptibility, we need to be able to make that determination. We don't need heart rate variability to do it. There's a lot of things we do in chiropractic already. Just finding the fact there's a subluxation deductively tells you through formal logic that if there is a subluxation, there has to be a decrease of adaptability.
Right.
Right.
And as a profession, we certainly have to do more homework as a profession in the research area, and we have to task more people to do that and get more people to get on task. And I know you and I have a lot in common. One of the things we do have in common is the future, caring about the future of chiropractic. Why do you care about the future of chiropractic after you're gone?
Well, we're all here for a limited amount of time. Like I say, I only have 40 more years. Well into my 90s, but it's because I didn't have a problem that students have today. When I got out of school, I mean, I can relate to students. When I got out of school in the 80s, I paid for most of my school because I saved, from 3 jobs I was doing and all this stuff through my college years. And when I got into chiropractic school, I didn't work anymore, so that was all on my loans. That was all I had for loans, but all I could think of when I graduated is, where am I ever going to get $27,000? Because, I looked at that like, I know there's young people rolling their eyes right now, and that's kind of the point.
Right.
I look at our educational system, and, I've never been involved in the day-to-day running of a school and that kind of a thing. So it's easy for us in the field to point our fingers at our schools and say they're the problem, but there's got to be a reason, and it's not just chiropractic schools, it's all schools. The expense these students incur is ridiculous.
Right.
So you come out of school $150,000 in debt, and the bank won't give you a loan, and you want to do what you do or what I do, and you look at that and think, by the time I build an office, I'll have to declare bankruptcy because I can't afford this student loan. So it's a catch-22. There's a book called The Fourth Turning. I can't think of the one author's name. The other one is the second one is HOWE, but it's FOURTH Turning, and it's an excellent book to understand, but it's a horrible book to read because there's no pictures in it. You need to throw an illustration or a pop-up. But if you're interested in this subject, you can go to YouTube and just type in Fourth Turning and generations or something, and you'll find it. But they're, these sociologists, they trace back to the 1500s. These 4 generations that repeat every 80 years. They're 20-year generations. And I am what I would lovingly refer to as the ass end of the baby boomers. I'm one of the younger baby boomers. They call them prophets in the book. It sounds really cool to be a prophet, but they're poor people. We're greedy. We're industrious, but we're greedy. We don't really care much about what's going to happen after the effect takes place of what we do. And we get behind 2 different ideals as a generation, and I think this, you think that, you suck, no, you suck. And this is all you have to do is look to Washington, D.C. right now. That's my generation, top to bottom, that's in Washington, D.C. right now. We're horrible people as a whole. There's a lot of good people in there, but as a whole, this is what we do. We argue. It's why you can't put a political sign in your yard and your neighbor put the other political sign in their yard, and you won't talk to each other anymore. But that's my generation. We've done this.
Right.
Last time we were here was in the 20s. We made a lot of similar economic moves through the 20s that we're making these days, and it blew a huge bubble and the stock market burst, and it's just a long, the story of the Great Depression.
Right.
But the kids, skipping the generation in between, don't mean to skip you, but we're just going to skip you for a minute, because that generation, they're kind of tired of the whole I think this, you think this, and they just go, don't get involved in chiropractic, don't get involved in associations, don't get involved in the political side of our profession. And I get that, because that's where they're at. I understand that. But the thing is, the generation behind them, which are the people that are recently out of school all the way down 20 years, they're the next hero generation. And the last time they were here, they fought World War II, they fixed the Great Depression, they do all the good things, but they galvanize behind one single ideal. We just don't know what it's going to be in our profession. If they galvanize on the chiropractic side of the chiropractic profession, we'll be fine. But if they galvanize behind the side that says we have to maximize profits in chiropractic and do anything a scope will let me do, we're done.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying.
So it's really up to them, and that's why I care, because I look to what's going to happen, and I won't be here to see what happens. Hopefully, what I mean by that is it'll be long enough away that I won't have to worry about it. But it's frightening when I think of the people who were here. When I was a few years out of school, it wasn't unusual. I mean, you go down to Sherman for their lyceum, you'd see Harold Hughes walking around, you'd see Theron Olson, you'd see all these great old chiropractors. And, my favorite part of coming down there was just to sit in the hotel lobby with Harold Hughes over a little 8-pack of Shorty Millers with him and his wife, and Gail and I, we just sit there and just chit-chat. And I love to hear what they were about. And the Browns, they're at campus, and and it's like that at a lot of schools. As a student, I remember this little old man going down a sidewalk, and people were walking around him like he was a fire hydrant. and he was just a little guy. And I said, do you need a hand? Are you heading somewhere? He goes, no, I'm good. And we walked, and I looked over, and his name tag said he graduated in 1922. And I thought, I found the guy I'm going to spend this whole weekend talking to.
There you go.
You know, and that's how it used to be. The students today are never going to meet those people. They're going to hear stories about Fred Barge. They're going to hear stories about, you know, Mary Ann Pruitt and Leonard Rutherford. And, you know, someone had a conversation going that involved John Sayre Sr. from New York on the Facebook the other day. And they just bring back fond memories because these were great people. But the one thing they had in common is they galvanized behind the chiropractic ideal, and that's what they cared about. And we have to figure out how to help this generation see the value of what we do on our side of the profession. That's why I'm doing this adaptability symposium. They need to understand this, because if we don't see that we have everything that every other health field is looking to have, we're in serious trouble. So,
yeah. And I'll tell you, the first time I met you, I was a student at Sherman. You probably don't remember it, but I was a student at Sherman. You were attending Lyceum, and we just talked briefly. I just would love that about Sherman Lyceum and the people that would be there and the old timers and getting to talk with them. It was so exciting to chat with some of these people. I had a man, you'll find this interesting, come into my chiropractic office. There was selling older gentleman, and he walked in to sell me face paper, and started talking a conversation with him. And he apparently had been a chiropractic supply person in the Denver area for 50-something years, right?
Oh my.
And so we started this conversation. I said, I'm going to learn something from this guy. And he had met B.J. Palmer when he was out here. He had met Spears.
Sure.
And all these. He actually was the supplier for Spears Hospital back in the day. And he hand delivers paper in out of offices. He drives around and delivers. So I talking to him, and I asked him, what's the difference between when you're at programs, conventions, and such now versus back in the day? And what he said was disturbing. He said the conversation. I said, what do you mean? He said, when you're in a program now, they talk about how much money they make, what marketing they're going to do, and things like that. And he said, what I remember is you'd be talking to people, they'd talk about subluxation, innate intelligence, best ways to adjust people. Like, the conversations were completely different.
Yeah, that's a great example. And I mean, this is someone who's not even a chiropractor.
Not a chiropractor.
Was a fly on the wall to our profession. I mean, granted, he's been hanging around that wall a long time. But I mean, that sums it up in a nutshell. I used to have a booth that I would do, and I had a big book of 8x10 photographs that I would bring with me. I have 3,000 of old photographs from the old days, and I would leave them out there, and I loved it because old chiropractors would always make a beeline for the booth, and they'd have chairs there, and they'd sit there all day and talk to people, because that to me was the neat part of it, is listening to students get to talk to Mrs. Sherman when she'd come by, or whoever it might be. Mm-hmm. And I remember the day she was flipping through the photographs, and there was one of Princess Marie Teton, that mummy that BJ had, X-ray of her with the, and she said, I remember Lyle coming home the day he took these films, these spinographs, and he told me, boy, it was so hard to do because she was falling apart, and the wrap coming off, and I'm thinking, boy, like somebody in that field of study of Egypt, they would have a stroke hearing her tell this story. But to me, it was fascinating.
So, and with that, I know you've had time to connect with a lot of greats in our chiropractic history that are now gone. What are some of the ones that you've had really enjoyed getting to connect with?
Well, Leonard Rutherford was an amazing man, and most people don't know him. He wrote what I consider one of the best books ever printed, with The Role of Chiropractic. It's a little hard to find. It's a paperback. We do have the family's permission to reprint it, and we were pretty much done with it a few years ago, and I just got onto another, how it goes. You get onto something else. I still have it. We'll get it done one of these days, and it's going to be something that's set aside for a scholarship or something for his family. I won't have anything to do with it other than to get it together for them, like I did with Harold Hughes's book. That goes to a scholarship, I believe, that's at Sherman, the Metal 75. Yeah, that sales of that book, it all goes towards that as far as I understand, because that was what I set up with him. And he passed away the week before the book was printed, so he never got to see it done. But Leonard was an amazing man. He graduated in '39, and he really cared about this profession. He felt kind of responsible, I think. I mean, this isn't what he told me, but I think because he was involved in the mid-'70s, early '70s, when the ACA and the ICA both had their own accrediting bodies. And the ACA had the CCE, which we're all familiar with, and the ICA had their accrediting body. And Washington, the Department of Education said, look, we're not taking either one of these until the two of you get together, bring back one that you both agree on, and we'll get this done. So they went through binding arbitration in Chicago at the 4-point Sheraton, which is why for our diplomate program we used to use the 4-point Sheraton, because it just had bad juju. We needed to fix it.
I love it.
But at this meeting, the ACA and the ICA agreed that neither one of them would put anything forward until they hammered everything out. They would put one forward.
Right.
They shook on this deal, walked out the door, and the following Monday morning, the ACA marched into Washington, D.C. and gave them the CCE, and that's why we're where we are.
Yep.
Leonard felt a little responsible because he was a man of his word. If he told you he wasn't going to do something, he was going to do something, that's exactly what he would do. And that's a theme through these great people I've had the opportunity. I was very fortunate to be around, and I think that the reason he fought so hard to get the CCE to change to where it was more like it was originally supposed to be, with the two sides coming together, he never gave up. He passed away, I think it was around 2000, but in '98, he and I and a few other old chiropractors, we went to Washington, D.C. and testified at the Department of Education meetings, and, it's picked up steam in 2012. It was looking pretty good, and,
right.
But the sad thing is, it's like everything, everybody gets excited about it, but we don't give people something to do. I don't know why, but when you have a list of 10,000 chiropractors who are interested in the CCE issue, which was a Facebook page,
right,
and you don't ask them to write a letter to your local congressman, your state, whoever, give them something to do to keep them active until this comes up again, they're lost, they're gone.
Yeah.
So it has to be restarted. And but Dr. Barge was probably my biggest influence. We became friends because after the first LCP class, which is like the ACP Sherman does now.
Right.
One of the speakers, it was a second class actually. One of the speakers did an hour. We didn't know who this woman was. It was someone that the president of the school at the time wanted to have speak, and she was a nice woman. I'm not going to say anything disparaging about her, but she didn't know much philosophy, and it was more about running your office. And we were looking around at each other, thinking, "What is this? We come here for philosophy." And so people were bitching in the hallways about it, and I sat down and I wrote out 2 pages of suggestions to maybe things to think about for the future of the program. And I kept it very positive, and I turned it into the people in the office. And I got a call from Dr. Barge asking me to come to a meeting, and the rest is history. And that's why I'm here right now, is because he pushed me. He pushed me very hard. He asked me one year, he said, next year in the LCP class, I want you to do I want you to do an hour on the signs of life and primary functions. And I said, well, I love to write. I'll write a speech for someone else. I'm really not that interested in speaking. I don't really feel like it, thanks, but no thanks. And he didn't even look up. He had his glasses down his nose with his legs crossed, and he said, make it an hour and a half. I thought, I better shut up, because this is going to get ugly. And so that's what got me started in doing presentations. And it was mostly philosophy until more recent years, where now I seem to do more on science and adaptability, because I feel our profession is being misled of what science is.
I agree. Yeah.
That's why, I think that, I throw that hashtag up there, and if Lance does as well, taking science back, because we have to.
Yeah.
It's ours. It's been mishandled. They're turning, there's good people trying to do this, but they're following an archaic model that needs to change.
Yeah,
so
absolutely. And on that kind of leads right into another important topic, which is our chiropractic education. It's worsened. It's worsened from the time I was a student, for sure. I graduated Sherman in '96. It's worsened from the time my mom was a student. She actually went to an interview at NYCC because that's where she went to school. We were in New York, and she didn't know anything about chiropractic other than help me improve my health status as a kid, and that's why she decided to become a chiropractor. And at the interview at NYCC, she didn't know any better. She said she wanted to become a doctor of chiropractic medicine, and the interviewer from NYCC corrected her and said there's no such thing. Interestingly enough, at her interview, and she was felt like, oh my God, I messed up, but she didn't have any knowledge, and from the time of the education my dad got at Columbia, it's progressively significantly changed. I hear what he learned and studied when he was there and who his mentors were, like Tom Whitehorn. And how do you feel about our chiropractic education, and what can students do and what can we do for them?
Well, what students have to realize, and we saw this, I'm not getting into a gun control conversation, so everybody here just calm down. We're not gonna But it's important to see what's going on. We saw these kids walk out, and what I just said a few minutes ago, these people are the hero generation. Don't screw with them. They're very serious. When they say there's a problem, they needed to be respected. All it had to be done, boy, I hate to use guns as an example. I'm not giving my viewpoints because that's not chiropractic, so it's something I don't care as much about. But had the NRA said we're going to get bump stocks and we're going to make it harder for people to get these whatever they are, the students would have said okay, and they'd have gone back to class. But they gave them nothing. Mm-hmm. That made them mad. Now it's going to be far worse down the road for that group that was trying so hard to hold on to everything. They're going to lose quite a bit over this, and they don't think that's true, but it's going to be true because my generation, the greedy one, is in right now. But this generation steps into Washington, there's no amount of money that's going to pay off some of these people. It's just not going to happen. It's the same thing in chiropractic. Students have the opportunity to have the voice for where we're going. Mm-hmm. It's my job and your job and the rest of us out here to help them galvanize behind the right ideal. Because if we get them to galvanize behind the chiropractic ideal, come up with some solutions for them to meet these ridiculous student loans. And I'm not picking on chiropractic education. It's true in everything.
Yeah.
When I started college, right out of high school, like everyone, it was $8 a credit hour.
Right.
And even our local junior college is 13 times higher than that now. Right. The faculty aren't getting 13 times as much money, which angers students because they're like, where is all this money going? Now, you've been involved in boards, and there's a lot more to this puzzle than people in the field know. Right. But the problem is we don't know the parts of the puzzle, and that's a mistake on the school's part by keeping it under this cone of silence as to why these expenses exist in the education system. We do need to change them. I don't think I needed to waste time in my education learning about the dracunculus medinensis. Amazonian tapeworm pretty rare in my practice. I had to learn about kuru, what you get from eating diseased human brains, and Hymenolipsis nana, and all these, from the footpads of mice and all this stuff. I can't get it out of my head. I wish I could soak my head in the bucket, just keep the chiropractic in there. I'm not saying education needs to be significantly shorter, but it needs to be significantly more chiropractic.
Yeah.
And there's a way of doing that by following science, which is what we've been talking about with adaptability. Chris Kent is one of the people who, is I think very much engaged on this issue in education. And I think he's a great guy, and there's a lot of great people out there that want to make a change, but we just don't know how. It's almost like we need a weekend somewhere for people that want to help shape the future of the profession and in a chiropractic direction, in a chiropractic profession, because crazy as we are, to want chiropractic.
Imagine that.
To bring some of the best people we can find in to help us, shape this for the students. But the students have the power. If the students walk out, there was a problem at Palmer back in the late 90s. The students wanted an answer to, I think it was 13 questions, and they told them no. Well, administration. I'm shortening the story. They weren't answer these questions because they thought, well, why do you need to know this? We're not going to do it. And the students said, well, we're going to block the entrances to school. No one goes to school till we get answers. And they said, how's Tuesday? And that's how it works. The students got answers, and for the questions they had, it was a lot of the things that are questions for students at every school. I'm certainly not picking on Palmer. or any school. I think, like I said, a great chiropractor can come out of anywhere. It depends on where you are, what your mentality is, what you view your education through that lens. But yeah, if we can start to focus our education more on chiropractic and giving the students the tools to understand that they do have the power. And I think seeing these students in Florida, again, that's not a chiropractic issue, but seeing these students in Florida is showing this generation that we do have a voice and people will listen to us because they are going to be the ones to decide what the future is. And I'm so hopeful that it's going to be a chiropractic version of chiropractic that comes out of this. You know, my wife had a cord injury in the mid-'90s, and you know, the best neurologist in Chicago told her that she was going to be she's just going to be a quadriplegic and she was never going to get any better. Now you've seen her walking around doing things since then,
right?
Danny, and she's relatively fine, So I mean, as we all are, but that's because of chiropractic.
Right.
You know, I mean,
right.
It wasn't treating her cord injury,
right,
but it's the fact that the body can adapt so much better now. So
right, absolutely. Well, it's funny. The things you said about school and education. My first chiropractic lay lecture I heard, because I had gone to a number of chiropractors, and my health significantly turned around. I had some significant health problems as a teen, and that's why my mom brought me to a chiropractor. And my health changes is what made her go to chiropractic school. But the first chiropractic, no one ever told me what chiropractic was. The first lay lecture, you'll know this name, of course, was at a parent-student night, like the students brought their families for a night at the school at NYCC. Yeah, and was DiGiacomo, the first chiropractic lay lecture.
Oh, sure.
And I remember it because he had a steak. He had a steak, and he cut it, and was like, this won't heal, and that was the lay lecture.
There was probably a little more to it than that, but I get you.
That's what I remember.
Yeah, but it makes an impression. Everybody is going to get something else. I remember the first time I heard Reggie Gold speak, he came to Palmer, and this would have been about 88, something like that, and a little white-haired gentleman was sitting next to me, and they had a philosophy day, the first day of their homecoming back then, and it was just a bunch of people like you and I, different alumni or whoever wanted to speak would come back, and they'd have 7 classrooms you could go to at any given time. Well, we don't know who these field doctors are, so I was sitting in a class, and my best friend was sitting next to me, and this Grady Lake, who was this great little gray-haired guy with bow tie, he was a 47 grad from Palmer, and he was sitting next to me, and he leaned over and he said, in his seersucker suit, very Siddish, and he leaned over and he said, where are you boys going next? I said, I don't know one of these guys from the other. I don't know for sure. And he said, well, you're going with me. I said, okay, where are we going? He said, we're going to see Reggie Gold. And I thought, well, I've heard of him. And I remember sitting in the theater at Palmer, 300 and some people in this room, and I remember at one point I was looking around the room, and I actually had the thought, why are these people here? Because Reggie was not only born, but Reggie outswam all the other
Right.
spurs just to be here to talk to me. I knew that. I knew that the reason Reggie was born was because I needed to hear what he was saying that day. And I couldn't tell you much of what he said that day, but it made a huge impression on me.
Yep.
Now, I already appreciated philosophy greatly by that time, so it just really helped me see that there was a viable way of looking at this into practice. And, it's something that myself at $27,000 in debt wasn't a big deal. That's nothing. So, a student today has a much more significant thing to look at, and we have to respect the fact of where they are and show them how to practice like I do or like you do. And I think it's great that you're doing something in Colorado, because I couldn't tell you of anything in that area of the country since I've been out of school that's been going on. So I think it's important. One of the things I miss so much from being a younger grad and seeing these older chiropractors, I would go to my state association, their meetings, and there would be guys there from the 40s and 50s. They were just there because they were here, and they're all not all gone, but they're pretty much gone now. There's a few still around, of course, but the students and the young chiropractors don't have that that role model. Well, like you said, they talk chiropractic. You know, that paper salesman. Those conversations were going on, and it was important for me to say, yes, I can do this because these guys do this and these gals do this. I needed to see people doing what I wanted to do to know that I too could do this. And I think that's what's important about, you know, what you're doing and what we're doing, and what, you know, having these things in the profession for people to see.
Yep, absolutely.
If we don't get on this path, we're in trouble. We're in serious trouble.
And I agree. And one of the problems that I see so often is there's so much of us that come so close in our agreement. Even I remember being a student at Sherman, and all the heated technique and philosophical discussions, which are really great to help you grow. And you need that because it helps you really critically think. And we don't do enough critical thinking in chiropractic, sadly, unfortunately. One of the things that has irked me over the years, and I used to do it, and I've gotten a lot better, and now I've kind of recovered from doing it, is the shooting inwards. You know, is that there's such a small group of people that keep subluxation centered and the adjustment as centered as what we do and the reason of what we do, that I feel strongly about less of the shooting inward and more of supporting each other so that we can grow that circle. And learn from each other and support that happening and affect the next generation. What are your thoughts around that?
I think what you said makes perfect sense. You know, it's when we're young practitioners or even students, we're looking for an identity. We need something that we want to have, that ideal that we're going to be in chiropractic.
Right.
And instead of making it a chiropractic ideal and understanding chiropractic deeply as students, we focus on technique, because I can go to a weekend thing and that's me. I'm this now.
Right,
Instead,
exactly. Totally.
There's nowhere you can go and get a weekend of philosophy and really understand it. It doesn't work like that. It takes time and, years of working through things to get a good handle on what, where we are philosophically. But I think that grasping that wanting to galvanize behind something as a student so you have an identity is really important. We do it all through life.
Right.
But you're thrown into a chiropractic environment where you don't know anything. So you're susceptible, the technique things and that. And I'm not saying technique's not important. I think it's very important. But I also think that shooting inwards over technique is kind of stupid.
I agree 1,000%. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it really needs to be that we offer young graduates and students an understanding of our philosophical agreement in technique and, where we are with that. And I'm troubled by some of the things I see in technique today. I posted something in a chat thing this week about, how we have a branch of our side of the profession now that doesn't even use the word chiropractor anymore. They don't say subluxation, they don't say adjustment, they say correction, and they say misalignment. Well, misalignment is 100% mechanistic. There's no chiropractic in that.
Absolutely.
And a correction means there's no such thing as innate intelligence.
Absolutely. I agree.
So either you're extremely arrogant or you don't understand our philosophy. All you do is sit in technique classes and you haven't tried. And they really need to get back to what the greats in that wing of our profession, the Bud Crowders, the Len Rutherfords, the Mary Pruitts, the John Sayers, the Harold Hughes, the Theron Olson, all these great practitioners would slap them if they heard this today. And, I'm not being abusive to them. I'm just saying that they have to get away from this mechanistic view of what they do. They're lost.
Absolutely.
It's very sad.
We recently had that conversation at the Sherman board because we're working on our mission, and I personally had an issue with the word correction. And I said it leaves out, it makes the chiropractor too important and innate intelligence not important enough. Versus that an adjustment. There's very different, those terms mean something very different, and we end up making sure that the mission used adjustment instead of correction because that's what we represent, and it can be very misconstrued. A correction, especially with all the other people, professions that are addressing the spine, we don't want to be misconstrued that we're the same thing, because we're certainly not. Especially because now they're looking at the science of what health is new, because it's always been disease. What these people are looking at in adaptability research, and none of them know much about chiropractic,
they're looking at complexity. They're saying that, as humans we're very complex. There's so much going on, and they look at, say, heart rate variability. That how your heart rate shouldn't be static, because that's pathological. It should have that variance. Even at rest, it should have a variance. Now they're doing what they call complexity analysis on a lot of these research tools, and they're able to see things that you can't see by other simple analysis. They're doing it with functional MRIs. They're looking at complexity analysis of functional MRI signals, is telling them things about the functional MRI that you can't actually see on the functional MRI. So, I mean, we're able to get beyond what we currently understand into a whole other realm. There are textbooks on complexity analysis in healthcare that, but there's no field where they can apply this, because the drug companies are never going to let the medical profession go that direction as long as money matters. And money's going to matter for a long time, because you may get out of medical school and say, well, I have to have a house with a turret and a moat. I mean, I want that. And, nobody seems happy where they are today. And I think that, I'm down in my basement here right now, in the one of the layers in the basement. I'm sitting on a wooden chair. I don't know if you can see this or not.
I can see it.
It's a Lyceum chair from the 1920s that Bud had given me. It actually says a Palmer School of Chiropractic Lyceum on the back of it. But I revel in looking at what we can do for the profession, not what the profession can do for me. I'm very happy. I have what I want in chiropractic and in my life, because chiropractic's been great to me, and I have to give back. One of the things that my generation has done is we've depleted the resources of the fields in chiropractic. We've taken all the nutrient value out of it, and we reap, and we don't plow back. As a generation, there's a lot of good people in my generation. I'm not saying everyone's horrible, but as a group, and it's something that I really feel needs to change, and I think it's important for people to support our students. I would like to see more ways of interacting in the field with the students, maybe even not on a one-on-one level. Mm-hmm. We used to do cleanups at the Palmer Mansion. Gail, my wife Gail, would organize them, and we would tell people, hey, they'd say, I really want to come, and it's like, well, you know what, you can have a student work in your place. It's nothing big. It was like $25, and people go, I'll send 100 to get 4 students to work at my place, and it was just kind of, it sounds kind of demeaning to say it that way, but it's important to give people ownership of our profession. And people that went out to BJ's fence and sanded it down and repainted it, they're going to walk by that fence 30 years from now and point to their kids and their grandkids and say, I painted that fence, because they have ownership. And it's something we don't allow the field to have in our profession. We don't let them have ownership of to the point where they feel they need to contribute to plow something back in. And it's something that our schools need to start to address a little bit more. But even events like, there are people who say, I want to pay for a student to come. We have the same thing happen. And I think that's great, because anytime you can get students involved, to be around people that they, some of the, especially the older chiropractors that in 20 years are going to be memories, I think it's important.
Well, yeah, and that's why I remember students from schools all over going to Sherman Lyceum, which was excellent, and students from all over go to the Adaptability Symposium. I put a big push to make sure students go to Mile High from all over, because I want them to get exposed to chiropractic,
Yeah. Chiropractors that think the way you and I do. Right. If they're successful and we just get in a room and talk to each other, it was pointless. We have to help people that want to do what we want to do. Right. And I'm not meaning that, well, look at us, we're so great. Not at all.
No, yeah, exactly.
So great, and we understand that, and that understanding is something I think is important to.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I have to say, I really appreciate you taking your time to record this episode with us. This is going to be coming out on iTunes and Stitcher and a number of channels for podcasts. And actually, it's downloaded in 35 different countries these days. So this is outstanding. Wow. It has a great reach. And I want to encourage, again, people, go to the Adaptability Symposium so you can learn more about the science, the philosophy of chiropractic. It's the weekend of September 28th. Clear your calendar for being at Mile High in August, and learn more about chiropractic. Learn more than what you got in school. I know when I was in school, I was reading a bunch of these in between class, right? You've got to dive into chiropractic books and learn more, whether you're a chiropractor or a chiropractic student, because there's a lot of wisdom within chiropractic that's not in the educational system, sadly, and the future of chiropractic depends on all of us. So, yeah.
I'm still a student too.
Absolutely. I consider myself that as well. And so thank you for joining us on the podcast. Yeah, thank you for joining us on the podcast, everyone. Thank you for listening. If you enjoy the podcast, A, subscribe, and B, share it with others. We bring chiropractic information, so as a resource for chiropractic enthusiasm and learning and philosophy, science, art, vision, and business strategies as well to be successful. And actually, I just thought of a story I got to tell you. Well, before I do the closing thing, that gentleman, when he told me about that with the chiropractors that had sold the face paper, he talked about being here when BJ Palmer spoke and how much impact that had and how the chiropractors thought, like, I want people to have that in whatever location or resource they have and that they can get to, whether they be a student or a DC. So we have a little bit more. I feel like there's a renaissance that has to happen, and it kind of is happening because insurance is dying away. So people are changing what they're doing, which is good. So again, thank you for being on the podcast. We'd love to see people at Mile High, August 16th to 19th, www.milehighchiro.org, and we're going to have information about all of Dr. Rob's texts in there, and thank you again for tuning in. Like our page on Facebook, www.facebook.com/Mile High Chiro.